right, everybody. Welcome to our April community newsletter. This features our final pre-Readcon interview with the team behind Women's Art Wednesday. A little article about some memories of Readcon, an article about Selena, and a few other things. Just a quick reminder, Readcon is on Friday, April 11th, and we'd prefer if you register so we know how many people to expect. You can do that at mylibrary.us/Readcon. That'll take you right to the spot where you need to register. But if you don't get around to registering, show up anyway. There's probably going to be enough space to accommodate you. So if you just can't get to it or forget or whatever, come anyway. So if you have time, please register. If you don't have time, show up anyway. All right, so we're going to dive right in to a Readcon Q&A. This is, by the way, our audio edition of our newsletter. So I'm going to read the newsletter out loud. This makes it a little easier for people who might not be able to, who may need to use like assistive software and that kind of thing. It also is, a different way you can absorb the news of the newsletter. Maybe you've got a commute or something like that, and this is better for you than reading something from our newsletter. So here we go. This starts with a Readcon Q&A, which is just kind of a sort of an FAQ about the event. There are two kinds of people I try to advertise events like Readcon to. Isn't that the perfect start to any article? Don't you want to know what the two types are, even if only so that you can argue passionately about how wrong I am? The first kind are what I uncharitably think of as fish who have, unfortunately, been confined to a barrel. This is not a slam at all. You all are just folks who don't need much of a hard sell. You hear that we've got books, reading, writing events, and you're like, when and where? And I say, link Library Innovation Center, Friday, April 11th. And you say, cool, thanks. And I say, no problem, just part of my job. And this goes on a long time because we're both too polite to just say, all right, enough already. Let's put a period at the end and move on with our lives. The other group I want to tell about Readcon is made up of people who might want to go, but they don't know exactly how an event like this works. Do you dress up? Do you bring candy? Yeah, always candy. So let's do a quick guide to attending events like this. That way, all your fears should be addressed and we can all have a great time on the 11th. Question: what kind of preparation do I have to do? Answer: you don't have to do anything. You can just show up. Nobody's going to give you a quiz, and it's not like going to a Metallica concert where the Memory Remains starts and James Hetfield takes the mic out into the crowd for the chorus, and you're horribly embarrassed because you don't know the words, which, by the way, are just da 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 da. So you really should have known them. If you want to, you can check out one of the books by our guests, And the Wind Whispered by Dan Jorgensen, Save Me Stranger by Erica Krause, and or Women's Art Wednesday by Paloma Barraza and Jane Thompson. Question: I don't have time to read 3 books in the next month, or week as it is. Answer: yeah, me neither. I'll give you a tip here. If you start with Women's Art Wednesday, you're in good shape. It's a book you can get a lot out of in a short time, and you don't necessarily need to read the entire thing to get a good idea where it's headed. Erica Krause has a book of short stories out, Save Me Stranger, so you could just read 1 or 2 of those and be all set. Dan Jorgensen's books do have intricate plots and casts of characters, but if you wanted to get started on And the Wind Whispered, it's okay to come to Readcon even if you haven't finished or started. This event is just as much about the authors minting new fans as it is about talking to their existing fans. Think of it like going to a comic book movie. Some of the people in the crowd, me, are super fans, constantly poking their neighbor and explaining how much of Thor Ragnarok was ripped off from the pages of World War Hulk, and how annoying that is because it means we'll never get an MCU World War Hulk. But most people there can just sit back, relax, and enjoy, no prep work necessary. Q. Okay, what happens at these kinds of events? A. You'll sit in a chair, an author will talk a little, and they'll probably read a little something. Then we'll switch to a different author, they'll talk a bit, probably read a little something, and you can just keep right on doing your sitting in the chair thing. Someone's phone will probably have gone off by now because it's 2025 and everyone has a phone, and the chances of everyone remembering to turn their phone to silent is a statistical impossibility. Then we'll make one more switch, and our third and fourth author will take the stage together. Then we'll bring all the authors back on stage to have a panel discussion where they'll all answer questions together. For your part, by the end of this, your candy stash will be mostly depleted, your chair will just be starting to get a tiny bit uncomfortable, you'll have that weird itchy feeling in your hands that you get when you clap a lot. All in all, a good time. You don't have to do anything during the event other than being polite and listening, or at least pretending to listen if you happen to space out. It's okay, it just happens. Just try and come back into focus without too much of a fuss. If you have a question, you'll definitely get the chance to ask it, but nobody's going to force you. Question: if I did ask a question, what kind of question should I ask? Answer: it's pretty wide open within the bounds of being polite and so on. You can ask a question about the stories or the characters in the books. You can ask about the process of writing a book. You can ask about the process of publishing. You can ask about some good books the authors have read lately. You can ask them about how they balance living a human life with writing. You can ask them what is best about the library. Just for example. Question: do I need tickets? Answer: you need to register. You won't get a paper ticket, but you will need to save your seat, so make sure and register now. mylibrary.us/readcon. Question: is downtown Greeley safe at night? Answer: we get this question here and there, and while it's not my favorite question, instead of pretending like we don't hear this whispered from time to time, I'll just answer: yes. I lived downtown for many years, and it's pretty darn safe. I've spent many an evening across the street at Weldworks, and I've never had any kind of problems other than my self-imposed single cheeseburger per visit limit. The library has security guards during open hours, and they will also be in and around the building during Readcon as well. If you're still not sure, I suggest bringing a friend, maybe like 5 friends, along with you. That's a good way to feel a little more secure and boost attendance. This is what's known as a classic win-win. What if I'm coming from outside Greeley and want to make a day of it before the event starts? Answer: wow, that's actually a great idea. There's a bit of gray area here. I'm not really supposed to endorse private businesses and whatnot in my capacity as an HPLD employee, so tell you what, I made a guide to my personal recommendations. Not endorsed by High Plains Library District, just a guide to some of my favorite Greeley businesses and things to do for a day out on the town. It's something I made for another unrelated thing, and we might as well get some use out of it. Think of this as what I might suggest if you sidled up to the desk at the library and asked me where I like to eat lunch or take a walk. Again, this is a very subjective look at Greeley and some things to do, not an all-encompassing or even fair tour guide. Even if you're a longtime Greeley resident, check it out. You might find something you've never considered before, like a giant wooden ape. Something a lot like a giant wooden ape. Now, I'm not going to go through the entire guide here, just because this is the newsletter and it's kind of, it would double or maybe even more the length of this whole thing. But if you want to hear it, if you do want me to make an audio version of it, send me an email, pdirk, D-E-R-K, at highplains.us. If I get a couple requests for it, I'll go ahead and do it. Q, when is Readcon again? A, Friday, April 11th, which is easy to remember because that was also the launch date of Apollo 13. Wait, maybe that's not a good one. Birthday of Poet Laureate Mark Strand. There, that's better. Now we'll move into our last Readcon interview. This was done with Paloma Barraza and Jane Thompson, who are behind the book and online project Women's Art Wednesday. So sometimes they answer questions together, sometimes individually. I'll say who's answering what at each time. Just as a reminder, I'm not going to try and do like their voices or something. I'm not a voice actor, but I'll do my best to just sort of make it distinct or obvious who's speaking. We have our final interview with Readcon guests Paloma Barraza and Jane Thompson, co-authors of Women's Art Wednesday. The duo will be at this year's Readcon to give everyone a little insight into the world of art as well as the world of publishing and putting a book together, which is not easy. It only took me 3 tries to wise up and ask the interviewees for bios within the interview, so I don't have to type them out here. We can just jump right in. Aren't you lucky to be reading a newsletter that's so smartly put together? All right, High Plains Library District. First things first, let's do a quick bio for each of you. Paloma. Paloma Barraza is the librarian of history, Iberian, and Latin American studies at the University of Minnesota. Paloma has a master's degree in art of the Americas from the University of New Mexico, a master's degree in library and information science from the University of Arizona, and 2 bachelor degrees in history and art history from the University of Colorado. Paloma has worked in art museums, natural history museums, archives, public libraries, including HPLD, and academic libraries. Jane Thompson fell in love with art history in high school thanks to an AP art history course at Greeley Central. Go Wildcats. She was inspired to start Women's Art Wednesday while earning a bachelor's degree in art history from Colorado State University in 2017 with a focus on women artists in history. While she continues to work in education today, her favorite thing remains reading about all art history with her dear friend Paloma. Paloma and Jane. Paloma and Jane became inseparable friends when they met on the soccer field back in high school. Go Wildcats. While life has taken them in different directions, they continue to work together to share knowledge about women artists. They created Women's Art Wednesday together as an internet platform to highlight women artists once a week, every week in 2017. In 2022, they wrote and published a collection of WAW entries, one for every week of the year, which was promoted by bookstores, libraries, and museums, including the National Museum of Women in the Arts. They continue their work on WAW. It's WAW. I guess I'll try WAW. We'll see how that goes. WAW by running workshops with high school and college classes, talks to art groups and collectives, and of course, weekly posts. HPLD. When I saw the question that kind of kicked off the Women's Art Wednesday project, asking if I could name 5 women artists, I have to admit I couldn't. Do you think that's a pretty common thing, or am I outside the norm? Paloma and Jane. Yes, this is not an easy question to answer for most people, even those who work in the art world, believe it or not. The question derived from the hashtag Name 5 Women Artists campaign by the National Museum of Women in the Arts based in Washington, D.C. that began in 2016. The question took social media by storm and still continues to impact the art world today. People are usually shocked to realize they can't name 5 women artists, but it's pretty easy for them to bring 5 male artists in history to mind, even if they're not an art lover. All they have to do is to get 5 male artists is list the Ninja Turtles and add Van Gogh, for crying out loud. But when you ask about naming women artists, it really stumps most people. Our platform helps fill those gaps by providing weekly women artists, and their stories often reflect interesting parts of world history, so it's a great lens to learn about the world through. HPLD. I think this book is doing one of my favorite things a book can do. It's taking a lot of your experience and hard work and providing it to me in a form that I can understand and enjoy, even without knowing much about art. First of all, thanks for that. Second, how do you go about condensing all those years of education and practice into something that's really pleasant to consume? Paloma. When we created Women's Art Wednesday, we wanted to assure that the information we provided was easily digestible for most readers. We wrote a book that can be picked up and enjoyed by anyone without commitment of reading it front to back. While we could easily write in an academic voice about women artists, we understood that would limit who would enjoy our content. I will say it's not an easy feat. Jane is the mastermind behind editing our content to make it palatable and enjoyable for our audience. Jane. We make a great team. Paloma is the research workhorse, and I love to tailor the copy to be something everyone can enjoy. I think people often feel like the art/art history is unapproachable and pretentious, and to be honest, it can be, but the history of art is the history of all of us. So it's actually a really fun exercise to work on how to convey that to people, especially through talking about women artists. Having Paloma do such thorough research on every topic gives me so much to work with. From there, I just think about why something matters and why people should care about this part of history, and then I write about it as though I was talking to a friend. I think people generally just want to feel like they're hearing from a real person and not getting talked down to by academia. HPLD. You've both got a deep knowledge of art, and I wonder, is it frustrating to try and bring it down to, well, my level? Rewarding because you get to lend a hand? Little bit of both? Paloma. I always think about art in levels, and I make sure I know my audience. If we're speaking to a college art history class, we easily resort to our academic voice. What's the point of having all this incredible art information if no one can understand what you're saying? We prioritize connecting our audience with information they can relate to. Jane. For me, it's not frustrating at all. In fact, I get more frustrated by the fact that academia so often does a poor job of making its expertise relatable. Don't get me wrong, I love higher education, but I think it needs to do a better job of making its subject matter accessible because, like Paloma said, what's the use of having a really in-depth expertise if the majority of people can't connect with with why it's important? That's not a problem with people, it's a problem with the institution not marketing its knowledge well enough. HPLD. I really appreciated that from the beginning, the book feels pretty welcoming, and it acknowledges that I might not know much about art. As an outsider to the art world, it feels like there are some art books that are for artists and some that are for non-artists. Do you tilt your book towards one or the other, or both, from the outset, and did your goals ever change along the way? Paloma, I enjoy both. As an avid reader, I pick up books based on the experience I want to have while reading. I ask myself, do I want a book that challenges me critically, or do I want a book that presents information in a concise manner? Do I want a book I can enjoy reading while waiting for my plane, or do I want a book that will question my prior knowledge? It really depends on the day. Jane, I think we wanted to make something that could be interesting for people who are artists and historians, and also for people who aren't. We tried to strike a balance by bringing some art history to people who maybe don't know about it already, but also engaging art lovers with new artists they've never heard about. Like we said before, the interesting thing about the conversation around women artists is that even many art lovers can't name 5 women artists. So I like to think this book can be useful to people who fall into either category of reader. In general, I think our goal was to always make a book that had a little something to offer anyone who picked it up by making each entry pretty bite-sized and having a variety of historical and contemporary entries. HPLD. What were some of the challenges and maybe the benefits of translating this project into a book as opposed to doing it online? Paloma. We wanted to commemorate our hard work into a long-lasting format. Social media platforms are ephemeral spaces that may disappear at any moment. Jane. I won't lie to you, there were so many challenges with converting our work into a book. So many. Do you know you have to copyright fonts and that there are like 1,000 different types of paper you can choose from? Let alone how to format everything for printing, write enough entries to fill up a book, cite everything properly, and work with illustrators, editors, and designers. The book was at times a lot more like project management than it was like writing, but it was also so rewarding to bring it all together and have this concrete product of our work. Online, you basically just write, edit, and hit the post button. A lot more goes into the production of a book. HPLD. Your names don't appear on the cover or anywhere near the front of the book, right? I think the only place your names appear is towards the very end on page 90. Is that something that's common in the art world, or is this a choice you made for other reasons? Paloma and Jane. Nice catch. It's actually not very common. We wanted to really shine a light on the 52 women artists rather than us. We like to take a different approach to history, which tends to highlight the historian over the subject. We wanted to really keep the focus on our subjects. Also, like we mentioned above, a lot of work goes into a book, and we had a lot of people who contributed from research to design and illustration to editing. We give credit to ourselves and everyone who contributed in the back of the book. HPLD. Sometimes if I go to an art museum, I feel like that's not a place for me. It feels too fancy or something, and it kind of feels like the other people there are going to know that I don't belong there and chase me out. I know that's not really going to happen, but why do you think the art world feels that way to outsiders? Why do I think that when I go to an art museum as opposed to a planetarium? It's not like I know anything about planets either. Paloma. Those white walls can be daunting. I didn't have the opportunity to visit an art museum until I took AP Art History at Greeley Central High School. My teacher, Kevin Ronke, opened a new world of opportunities for me and showed us that anyone belonged in an art museum. We carry that same sentiment with our Women's Art Wednesday collective. Art is meant to be enjoyed by all, and many museums are working towards creating more welcoming spaces. You don't need prior knowledge to visit a museum. You can simply look and enjoy the spaces. Jane. I personally think there are a lot of ways the art world gatekeeps, and what you are talking about is a common experience. Art museums can be expensive, are usually found in big cities farther away from folks who live in small or rural places, and even the language used on the wall text can be really unapproachable. I think in many museums, basically the whole environment can come across as unwelcoming, and so much of that is because of the way we perceive fine art through the way history presents it, which is crazy. Because what I love about art history is that it reflects the history of basically all humanity. But part of what motivated us to start Women's Art Wednesday is that historical writing has created a narrative about art that places it outside of the general experience and makes it feel like this is this really big, unapproachable thing. The exclusion of women artists in a lot of formal history, museums, textbooks, etc., is linked to what you're describing with feeling unwelcomed. There's a narrative about art that excludes a lot of people and experiences. That being said, I agree with Paloma that a lot of museums are working hard to change that these days. HPLD. Can you give people like me who have some discomfort in spaces like art museums maybe some advice that might make the experience more enjoyable? Paloma. I always encourage people to attend a museum event. This helps alleviate any discomfort. Many art museums host fun evening events, movie screenings, music, artist talks, etc. These events are a great way to see the liveliness of a museum, and they show you around the spaces so when you return on a regular day, you already know where to go. I also recommend any tour, typically free, that they provide. Here you'll learn about various exhibits, and these tours provide knowledge about the art and the history of the space. Lastly, always ask and tell the museum staff that it's your first time. They'll be very excited to show you around. Similar to libraries, museum staff are very happy to show you the cool stuff. Jane. I would just second everything Paloma said and add that the history of art is everyone's. Art reflects our human history, and you have just as much of a right to engage with it as anyone else. HPLD. I noticed some local to HPLD names in the book. Kim Desmond, Danielle Butler. We live in an age where you can view and sometimes even buy art made by people all over the world, but local art and artists seem important. What do you think is the special appeal of something made close to home? Paloma. We wanted to commemorate local artists as we are both born and raised in northern Colorado. NoCo has a thriving art scene, and all of the living artists that we featured have a unique trajectory tied to Colorado. Jane. A beautiful thing about art is the way it engages with the human experience, and I think anything local, art, business, community spaces, can be a really special thing to connect to. I personally believe that everyone should consider how they can appreciate and contribute to the creativity, history, and connection of their local spaces. It makes life better. We are happy to celebrate the artists we know from all over the place. We have some NoCo folks in the book, as well as international artists we've worked with, and I really see the book as a love letter to art and culture created by women on every scale. HPLD. Reading through the book, there's a mix in the profiles of artists. Some are a little more focused on describing their work, some are a little more biographical. Is that a balance you felt natural? Is that a balance that felt natural, or was it something you had to push one way or the other at times? Paloma, you have a keen eye. Thanks, Paloma. The biographical entries are from women artists in history, while the contemporary/living artists focused on their work since they are still creating art. We did this to show the various stages of life of an artist. We did this as a way to show the reader that there are many ways to talk about an artist. Jane. Yes, one more thing to add, and some folks might not know. For a lot of parts of history, women were not allowed to enroll in formal art training/academies all across the world. Because of that, their work was often not included in formal shows, and therefore not included in the history books. Keep in mind, for a vast chunk of human history, when we didn't have mass media and many people couldn't read, society relied on imagery to connect with learning, and art created by the institution was a lot of what was recorded, forming what we understand about history both in the past and today. All of that to say, women were largely excluded from those records for a lot of history, which is part of why people have such a hard time bringing the work of women to mind. But that doesn't mean that women weren't creating art all the while. It just means that often there's not great records of it, or you have to do quite a lot more digging. Where this becomes relevant to our book and your question above is that we sometimes don't have as much information on lesser-known women artists in history, and we have to rely a little more on writing about the era they were working, their personal biographies, or other information to contextualize their lives/work ourselves. The records on women artists in history just aren't as robust as other artists. HPLD. How did you decide the order the artists would appear in? Paloma and Jane. We avoided creating a timeline of the 52 artists. We rearranged the entries by providing a nice blend of different art forms, time periods, and styles. This avoided any hierarchy or timeline, which is a more traditional and restrictive way of talking about history. We aimed for a variety in the artists we chose for the book and the order they appear in to give the reader less of a traditional art viewing experience, which we talked about above can feel intimidating for a lot of people, and ideally be something that they could flip to literally any page and learn something cool and fun. HPLD. I looked up Tatsu Hirota online after finding out about her in your book, and there's some information and a handful of images, but nowhere near as much as I expected. It seems like she's not the easiest artist to find out more about. Were there any artists that you hadn't known about and discovered for yourself in the process of working on this project? Paloma. This is where we use our academic art history research skills. We have a very organic way of finding women artists. Some are recommendations by our colleagues or followers. Some we find in books or articles. Some we see in art museums. When we find these artists, we do a quick preliminary search, good old Google, to see what information we can find. From here, we go into our fave database, JSTOR, and start searching. It's actually very time-consuming. Like Tatsu Hirota, there is little information out there, so we compiled all the information we could find. Jane. This artist is a great example of what I mentioned above. She had such an impressive career, such an interesting style, but it's really hard to find information about her because of the way society and history have valued work by women in a lot of time periods. No one really recorded much about her or elevated her life/career history at the time she was working, so the records are limited. I'll say this. Paloma is great at digging deep and finding information and context. She's an incredible researcher who has done so much to shine a light on artists, even when it's difficult. HPLD. It seems like the book could be read in a sitting, or you could piece it out over an entire year with one artist per week. You could read from the beginning to end or skip around. I imagine there have been people who've done it a number of different ways. Have you heard about anyone reading it in a way you didn't expect? Paloma. We did this as a way to incite readers to return to our book as often as they would like. I've heard of people who flip through the pages without looking, and whatever page they stop at, that's the artist they'll read on. Jane. There's no one way to read the book, which I love about it. But I will say one of my favorite things to hear is when folks share with me that they are reading it to their kids or people in their life who don't know much about art. I feel really stoked that we created something that can be easily enjoyed by a lot of people. HPLD. We're really excited to have you at Readcon in 2025, and for anyone who might attend, can you give us just a little preview of what you've got planned for that evening? Paloma and Jane. We want to make this an enjoyable evening for everyone. We may do a fun little guessing game of 5 women artists, start studying now, and giving the audience a little insight on how we conduct our research. We're also excited to share some knowledge with aspiring authors, even those who are working in fiction or non-art related works, about the publishing process and sharing everything we learned during this crazy project. HPLD. What's the best place for people to find Women's Art Wednesday online and support the project? Paloma and Jane. Our Instagram page, at Women's Art Wednesday, and our website, womensartwednesday.org. We have a Patreon on there as well. All right. Anything for Selena's by Evangelina Flores. This is about an event that happened at Link and about Selena. April 4th and 5th, 2025, Link Library Innovation Center is hosting an event called Bitty Bitty Bomb Bomb Because Our Hearts Still Beat Anything for Selena's. To celebrate the life and music of Selena Quintanilla Perez, the Texas-born, Grammy-winning fashion superstar, Reina of Tejano music, and I, for one, could not be more excited because at the ripe old age of 6, I knew I would do anything to be a singer like Selena. The year was 1995. The comal was on the stove, and my grandparents' kitchen was heaven, laden with the scent of warming tortillas. Sequins from my favorite purple dress caught the sun's rays and cast a maroon shimmer across the tiles as my abuelito twirled me across our kitchen dance floor to the beat of Ven Conmigo. Ven Conmigo. Made by my grandma and tia, my shimmery purple dress was a picturesque tribute to Selena's iconic purple jumpsuit. By the way, I'm going to do my very absolute best with the Spanish here, but Evangelina would be a much better reader for this article. To me, Selena was the idol of all idols, and she was everywhere. Songs like Como la Flor and Bitty Bitty Bom Bom played continuously on the radio. Every little girl wanted to grow up to be Selena, and those of us with curly locks now bragged about our Selena hair. Mamas, abuelitas, and tias got to work sewing glittering outfits to mimic Selena's most famous looks. Bustiers sparkling from the confines of a jean jacket had every Mexican-American father west of Texas shaking their head and massaging their temples. Selena y los Dinos had become a cultural phenomenon. Now fast forward almost 30 years. Let's skip the cute children's choirs, the agonizing piano lessons, the voice recitals, and the high school ensembles, which ignited a passion in me that would have given a certain Glee character a run for their money. Allow me to go even further, skipping my time studying music in college until now, January 2025. See, I've never moved on from my Selena obsession. I mean, what I said about being a singer like Selena. Well, almost. 6-year-old me might be surprised to learn that she would one day land a super amazing job in a library and not on a glamorous stage. But before anyone can get too disappointed, I get to do a ton of awesome music for programming. I've been invited to sing for a handful of library district events, whether it's introducing the next generation of musicians to music production software or hosting a music appreciation program for teens. There's nothing more fulfilling. By the way, Evangelina has sung the national anthem at the naturalization ceremony a couple times, and she's great. She's amazing. Anyway, back to 2025. Where I'm beating my head against the keyboard trying to get a newsletter article written about Selena. But where do I start? Selena shaped so much of my life. Like me, Selena identified as Mexican American. She grew up speaking predominantly English and, at her father's encouragement, learned to sing in Spanish. As she won the hearts of fans across the United States, one question remained. Would she be able to connect with her fans outside the country? After a concert in Monterrey, Mexico, the answer was a resounding yes. Her performance in Monterrey shattered attendance expectations, and she often referred to the concert as one of her most memorable. In the end, the power of her music overshadowed any doubts about her ability to speak Spanish or her Texas roots. The message of Selena's experience still resonates today, with many Mexican Americans grappling with losing their language, but still being expected to be fluent Spanish speakers in professional settings. As quoted, Selena's father, played by Edward James Olmos in the 1997 biographical film, illustrates, "Being Mexican American is tough. We've got to be twice as perfect as anybody else." While Selena's father made a point, through Selena we learned it's not about perfection. It's about being true to our authentic selves. Selena had conquered the Tejano music world with her Spanish songs and won the hearts of fans worldwide. Next, she would embark on recording songs in English, songs like Dreaming of You, Missing My Baby, and I Could Fall in Love. But Selena's career ended tragically. On March 31st, 1995, Selena Quintanilla Perez lost her life, but her legacy lives on. Her music is still passed from one generation to the next, and to my joyous surprise, clothing retailers still release Selena merchandise. So, at a library programming meeting back in 2024, my coworkers, fellow Selena fans, and I proposed an event to celebrate Selena Quintanilla. Well, griten con locura because we got the green light. We'll kick things off on April 4th with a screening of the 1997 film Selena. We'll enjoy movie quote-along games, Selena-themed loteria, and, of course, pizza. The fun continues April 5th with music, dancing, crafts, and fashion pieces featuring local Latino artists, musicians, organizations, and more. To all of the Selena fans out there, we hope you were able to come celebrate, reminisce, and dance with us. To those of you who are not acquainted with Selena, I hope you felt welcome to this event as well, because we all deserve to chase our dreams and be accepted for who we are. It's artists like Selena who will keep reminding us of that fact for generations to come. If you think about it, I kept my promise to my 6-year-old self. Late at night, when all the world is sleeping, I stay up and dream, just like my favorite singer. And to this day, I'd still do anything for Selena's. We've got our final article here, I think. Yeah. It's called 10 Years and 10 Memories of Readcon. Here we go. In 2013, me and a bunch of other HPLD staff got a challenge. For a few years, HPLD had been running a one book, one community type of program called the Common Read that was aimed to bring a lot of readers together around one book. It was a good idea. Lots of communities have done these sorts of area-wide reads. They were very hot at the time, and in HPLD's case, we got mixed results. The people who came out and read the books had a great time, and that wasn't an issue. But it was a little tough to get people to come out. I think at times book selection was a problem. We did lovely books like Fahrenheit 451, a book that, well, look, I think Ray Bradbury is amazing, and any book that gets made into a terrible video game with an incredibly tenuous connection to the original source material has a special place in my heart. But, well, if I'm being real with you, Fahrenheit 451 absolutely reeks of required reading. Give me a Martian Chronicles, also by Ray Bradbury, any day of the week. Know what I mean? But it's not very librarian-esque of me to blame the books, so let's move on. After a couple years of diminishing returns with the Common Read program, we changed things up and decided we needed to do something different. Readcon is what came out of those decisions. I could bore you with long tales of how we put it together and how the budgeting worked and why I preferred the first round of posters themed to look like propaganda posters. But instead, I'm giving you 10 memories of Readcon that do a better job of explaining the event's appeal than any chronological rundown ever could. Memory 1. There was an afternoon when we needed to move some very heavy shelving near the fireplace at FAR, the location of the first Readcon. A bunch of staff lined up, and we shoved and pushed, and we got one shelf moved without too much trouble. Then we went to move a second shelf, and what we didn't know is that underneath there was some kind of junction box or something, and long story short, we tore the ever-loving crap out of the carpet. One of the beautiful things about carpet tiles is that you can just replace any damaged parts without replacing the whole thing, and nobody's the wiser. Wink. Memory 2. To make a commercial for Readcon, I printed Readcon bumper stickers in quotes. You probably noticed that I put that in quotes. That's because the bumper stickers were standard label-sized, maybe 3 inches long and 1 inch wide. I acted in front of the camera, pretended to be super excited that the bumper stickers I'd ordered had finally come in, and then there was a hard cut to me applying several of these ridiculously small bumper stickers to my car. It's been well over a decade since I spent maybe an hour shooting that commercial, and the sticky outlines from those labels are on my car's bumper and trunk and side today. Memory 3. I had a friend who was working at FAR during the first Readcon, a friend at the time. It's 12 years later, and we're married. She was working on Readcon Day, and when I took one of my 1,000 trips through the back of the library, she asked me with excitement, "Are you having fun?" And I said, "Absolutely not." I still remember what her face looked like when it fell, the corners of her mouth plunging straight down like Beaker from the Muppets. She was sad for me, and it's a face I've come to know quite well over the last 10 years or so, the same face I saw when our freezer iced up and water ended up dripping into the fridge, and I had to text her to tell her that the leftover pizza was no longer edible, a victim of a truly cursed appliance. Memory 4. Craig Johnson was there at the first one, and he's just about the nicest guy you'll ever meet, and he made the entire year for a coworker's mom who was just enamored, or dare I say smitten. I dare say she was ready to jump in the pickup with him and head back to Absaroka County to live out the rest of her days in rustic tranquility, interrupted only occasionally by a little gunplay. Memory 5. There was beer, our first ever Books and Brews, and I got to see my manager take a sip of beer in the library, and man, did that bring a smile to my face. Memory 6. We closed everything down that first night, and I pretended to leave the library so I could force everyone else to go home. Then I went back in for 2 or 3 hours and moved furniture back to where it belonged. It was one of the very few times I was in the building solo, and if you've never been in a library completely alone at night, it's super weird. They do not prepare you for this in library school. Memory 7. I woke up early to take Mary Doria Russell to the airport the next morning, a trip during which she gave me all the dirt on what a bad deal ebooks were for authors at the time. It was very intimidating to take her to the airport, only topped by the time I drove Jean Luen Yang from DIA in the middle of a blizzard and was completely panicked that I was going to fly off the road, and if I did, it wasn't concerning that I'd die, it was concerning that I'd go down in history as the dum-dum who killed Jean Yang. That's what would be in my obituary and probably on my headstone. Pete, Dum-Dum Who Killed Jean Luen Yang, celebrated author of American-Born Chinese, available for $11.49 in hardcover on Amazon. Memory 8. We brought in audiobook narrator George Guidell one year, and because his travel was a little delayed, he called and left a message in my voicemail, which I never deleted because it's pretty rare to hear Walt Longmire himself say your name and tell you some details about a delayed flight or whatever. Memory 9. We did our last Readcon in 2015, and in early 2016, I got an email from some library users who asked what the plans were for 2016. I told them that, unfortunately, the program was being warehoused for a bit. I didn't necessarily expect to hear back from them, but later on one of them messaged me and told me that a few people got together in the fall and had their own Readcon, which included hitting a bookstore, doing some reading together, and just having a great book-centric time. If there's one thing that spells success for me when it comes to events, it's throwing them and then seeing how another group will pick up the idea and make it their own. It means the idea was good, it was viable. It meant something to someone. Memory 10. Well, I don't have anything here yet. I'm keeping the space open for this year's Readcon, because I just can't see how it wouldn't bring me a new awesome memory that I'll have to try and file in with all the other library memories I've built over the years. Resurrecting an event that's been dead for a decade is not easy. It's probably even harder than doing it for the first time. You not only have to put on an event, you have to deal with a legacy of opinions on what should and shouldn't be part of it, what the posters should look like, who the guests should be. The guests, by the way, are amazing. I've interviewed all 4 of them for these newsletters, and they're all thoughtful, fascinating people with strong local ties. I think you're really going to like them. They're committed. Everyone has committed, except for you. Commit to coming to Readcon. Commit to a Weld County that can host fine events like this, just like a Fort Collins or a Denver. Commit to getting to work on that book you've been meaning to write, and start by showing up and getting some inspiration. Or if you started that book a long time ago and kind of puttered out, commit to Readcon. See if that brings you back online. For each Readcon we did, I've got 3 or more treasured memories. I'm betting that if you come to this one, you'll be right up there with me. And if you've enjoyed the works of Jean Luen Yang or Mary Doria Russell, just know that the teeniest tiny sliver of that is thanks to me not killing any of us. I haven't been thanked in any of their books yet, but I'm sure they'll get around to me pretty soon. And there you have it. That's our March community newsletter, mostly focused on Readcon. I hope to see you there on the 11th, and thanks for listening.